Welcome everybody to the Stripe All Members meeting. It's Monday, March 4th. It's 10 a.m. We got an action-packed event for us to spend some time together over the next hour. To kick things off, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Sarah Rogers, president of ASP. We're going to bring you guys up to speed on National Adverse Drug Event Awareness Day, as well as the RIGHT Act. And then we have some featured speakers that we're really excited about to welcome and introduce. And then we'll be able to conclude today's meeting with an open and roundtable discussion. So with that, I'll pass it over to Sarah and we'll get things going. Great to see all of you guys.
Great, thanks Ben, and welcome to the Stripe All Members meeting. Today we are kicking off the 2022 campaign for National Adverse Drug Event Awareness Day. The theme of today's meeting is Impact on Patient Safety. We have an amazing panel of speakers here today to share their perspectives and experiences. Before we get to our panel discussion, I'll talk briefly about the campaign launch. National Adverse Drug Event Awareness Day will be held next week on Thursday, March 24th. This is a new national day that ASP inaugurated last year when we originally launched the Fourth Cause campaign to encourage people to share their journeys with an adverse drug event. The goal of the campaign is to spark a national conversation focused on medication safety and pharmacogenomics. We have a dedicated campaign page, which we recently updated. It's available at fourthcause.org. Fourth Cause is in part a social media campaign. Patients, healthcare professionals, and organizations can participate by using the hashtag #4thCause. A social media toolkit is available for download via the campaign website with drop-in stats and facts for Twitter and a campaign photo to share on Instagram, as well as some other information. We invite organizations and individuals to host their own educational or awareness event on or around National Adverse Drug Event Awareness Day. We will promote your event on the campaign page if you complete the event registration form. There are already several great events planned, so we encourage you to attend and share these events as well. Studies and statistics about the harm caused by adverse drug events are essential, but it takes personal narratives to drive change. Sharing a personal story can help raise awareness about the impact of avoidable medication side effects and adverse events. An important goal of the Fourth Cause campaign is to drive change by bringing these topics to the forefront. We've had a lot of questions about hosting a fundraiser. The most popular way to host a fundraiser would be to do a Facebook fundraiser to benefit ASP, and we also are a registered PayPal charity. Any proceeds from ADE Awareness Day would come back to Stripe, as well as our educational and advocacy programs. During our last meeting, we had speakers from Representative Swalwell and Emmer's offices on to discuss the Right Drug Dose Now Act. So if you visit fourthcause.org/RIGHT Act, you can read more about the bill, including a section-by-section summary. You can also support the bill by signing on as an individual or on behalf of your organization. In brief, the bill would require an assessment and update of the National Action Plan for Adverse Drug Event Prevention that was initially put out by the Department of Health and Human Services in 2014. It would create educational campaigns on preventing adverse drug events, in part through the use of evidence-based PGX information. It incentivizes updates to electronic health record systems to ensure that healthcare providers can better utilize pharmacogenetic information when making prescribing decisions. It would also seek to enhance reporting systems to better assist with the reporting of PGX-associated adverse drug events and kind of tie in PGX as the root cause of events when appropriate, and authorize sustained funding for PGX implementation research and guideline development. A full list of organizations who have already signed on to support the RIGHT Act is also available at fourthcause.org/RIGHT Act. If you haven't already done so, mark your calendars for March 24th and help raise awareness about adverse drug events and pharmacogenomics. Follow the hashtag #4thCause to join the conversation. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ben to introduce our first speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're excited to hear from the community today, and the diversity of perspectives and participation of professionals and stakeholders across the care continuum and value chain is the bedrock of the Stripe community. As we're fond of saying, each of us needs all of us. And today, we're excited to bring you the voice of the patient. We are excited to introduce you to two patient voices with powerful stories and PGX journeys to share. Allow me to introduce our first speaker. On Joanne. So, our first speaker, Joanne McIntyre, is a patient advocate and champion of patient medication safety. Following a successful Whipple surgery for stage 1 extrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma, Joanne's husband was prescribed capecitabine as an adjuvant chemotherapy for his remaining precancerous cells. Due to a previously undiagnosed dpyd enzyme deficiency, his body could not break down the medication, and he lost his life from a toxic overdose. Although the antidote, Vistagard, was administered, it was started 5 days beyond the window for a reversal of the deadly toxicity. Joanne later learned that his life could have been saved with a simple and inexpensive cheek swab test. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Joanne as she shares her story and PGX journey.
Good morning from Portland, Oregon. I'm going to try to bring up my files to, here we go. Okay, so Ben actually laid out pretty much the basis of my story, but I wanted to start with some pictures to show our family on Thanksgiving, November 22nd, 2018. That was after 6 days on his first and only course of capecitabine. The very day after Thanksgiving, he started with vomiting and diarrhea symptoms. They progressed over the weekend. I contacted the oncologist office on Monday, said he needs to be seen. Now he has a body rash. He's developing mouth blisters, and we were told just to treat him at home with over-the-counter medication. A trip to the emergency room the next day indicated that his symptoms were worsening. He was treated for the symptoms individually, but not for a systemic breakdown that clearly was this dpyd enzyme deficiency. So let's go back to starting out with the prescription of the chemo. So during the informed consent process, there was no discussion about dpyd enzyme toxicity. We do believe that in informed consent, material risk needs to be included, and material risk of death from this particular chemo is quite clear. So that's one issue that I hope can be addressed in the informed consent process down the road. The other thing that went wrong is that the oncology triage nurses that I contacted over the phone, with a total of 5 phone calls in a 7-day period, did not ask specific questions about the level of his toxicity. So they were not informed about the symptoms of extreme toxicity versus expected and normal toxic reactions to this chemo. And the same was true in the emergency room. The doctors were treating his symptoms individually rather than looking at it as an indication of something greater than just normal side effects. The dpyd test was ordered a week after he began to show these incredible toxic reactions. The test was ordered, but the Vistagard was not ordered for another additional 5 days. So there was no awareness of the need for ordering the Vistagard, which has a 98% or 96% success rate for reversing all of those toxicities. So by the time the Vistagard came, he was well into at least 7 days beyond this window. And the Vistagard, when it finally did come, was not prepared properly by the nurses. It needed to be ground into a fine powder for NG tube administration, and that didn't happen. So his tube clogged. So there were a number of things that just didn't go well at all. If any one of these had been done properly, his life might have been saved. So how often does this happen? This particular chemotherapy has been on the market for over 60 years. The connection between dpyd enzyme deficiency, toxicity, and this particular chemo has been known for 25 years. And it seems to me that the medical community in the United States believes that it is rare, but it is an acceptable reaction to the chemo. And I think that the illusion that VistoGuard is going to be the saving grace is absolutely not true, because if you don't catch the symptoms, if you don't diagnose them immediately as dpyd enzyme deficiency toxicity, you're going to lose that 96-hour window to reverse the toxicity and save the patient's life. So when you look at the percentages of people who have this deficiency, 3 to 7% have a known dpyd variant. There's a 50% chance of severe toxicity and 3% chance of death. So we believe that there are about up to 1,300 people a year just in the US alone who die from this. The deficiency is asymptomatic, so there's no way you would know that you were deficient unless you were tested or unless you took this particular chemo. So we're trying, I'm with a group of people across the United States who have formed advocates for universal dpyd, dpyd testing. And we believe that we're making some really good headway in getting the word out. We sent in a petition back in 2016 to remove the words rare and unexpected from the literature that is associated with this chemo. So that did happen. We have another citizen petition before the FDA right now that would mandate at least announcing or including in the literature that comes out with this chemo, including a mandated discussion. We're not even asking for mandated testing at this point, but at least have a discussion. And we've had a lot of good responses to our citizen petition. We've had a number of medical professionals across the country who have written in and given their good reasons for passing this citizen petition. Let's see, in Europe, the Europeans are well ahead of the United States in at least discussing this deficiency or mandating the testing. So in the province of Quebec, for instance, it's mandatory to test before you take this chemo. It's mandatory in France and in the Netherlands. So they are certainly making great progress. President Biden has reignited the cancer moonshot and cancer as we know it. And his goal is to reduce the number of cancer diagnoses in the next 25 years by 50%. And the whole focus is on the right treatment for the right patient. Pre-screening dose adjustments are cost-effective and save lives. We know that. There's no doubt about that. I'm delighted that the STRIPE initiative and the Fourth Cause initiatives are bringing attention to the need for testing, and I'm happy to be a part of those two groups that Sarah has initiated to bring awareness. So here's a picture of the loved ones who have died. These are all members of my group at the Advocates for Universal dpyd, dpyd testing. They all died from the very same reason that David died. Every death was preventable, which is just incredibly tragic because it's been known for 25 years about this association between dpyd deficiency and this particular chemotherapy. We've made progress as well in getting the word out to organizations such as NCODA, ISMP, the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation. They've all added materials to their websites to promote testing, to bring awareness of it, to educate their readers, their membership, their patients. So we are again making some headway, which we're quite excited about. And let's see what else we have here. I mentioned that in Europe, all over Europe and the UK, they either have mandated testing or recommended testing. It's in their health authorities' proclamations. The US has additional physicians and hospitals that are now aligned with us, and they are doing testing. It's part of their standard of care now. Not enough hospitals are doing it, but we've gotten a good start. The type is a little small on this map to read, but you can see that it's beginning to spread across the country. So how can you help? Spread the word. Speak with everyone you know who's associated with the medical community. Spread the word with your friends who might be embarking on any sort of chemotherapy. If anyone has associations with the insurance companies, I'm going to throw out one little figure that I thought was kind of shocking. If David had had a little cheek swab, which cost approximately $50, it would have saved his life. It would have indicated that he did have a deficiency that needed to be checked into further. The cost of his medical care for starting the day that we first brought him into the emergency room up until the day he died was just under $500,000. That's the amount that the hospital billed our insurance company for the lack of a $50 cheek swab. And if you would like to comment on our citizen petition before the FDA, here's a link to that. And we welcome additional comments. And lastly, I just wanted to thank Dr. Terry Klein for inviting me to speak today, to share my story, for Sarah for all the work that she's doing to promote safety in medication, and Melinda Piccini of the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation, who has been very encouraging and spreading the word, adding information to their website. And of course, I'm delighted to be associated with audt, our advocates for universal dpyd testing. So that's the end of my presentation, and I hope that the word continues to spread. We need safety in medication, and especially for this particular chemo, since it's the only one in the world that requires these enzymes in order to metabolize it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for your time this morning. Well, for those of you that are just joining or that might have joined late, I'm going to now introduce our third speaker, Julie Holt. For those of you who don't know, Julie Holt is the Chief Nursing Officer and Vice President of Patient Care Services for the Christ Hospital Network in Cincinnati, Ohio. And the Christ Hospital has an extensive network of over 6,500 employees and 1,200 physicians over 100 locations across Cincinnati. And Julie has a PGX journey that has changed the way she thinks about precision medicine and her approach to patient care. Please welcome Julie.
Hello, thanks everyone. I'm sorry I was late today, and I really appreciate this opportunity. So just a little bit about how I became aware. Of course, I work with Dr. Burns Blacksall, and I am involved in our precision medicine and our PGX work, but didn't really think that it applied to me. I like to think of myself as still fairly young and healthy, but one day I got a text and found out that I randomized into a study because I was on a few different medications that could be, influenced by my genetic makeup. So I am always up for something new. So I jumped on that and did that testing and found out that I did have some incompatibilities with some of the medications that I was on. One of which was a medication for GERD, gastric reflux, And the interesting thing is I've had gastric reflux for probably about 15 years and have been on multiple medications, multiple scopes, because I continued to have pretty bad heartburn. And luckily, everything looked good, but it was not a comfortable thing, and was increasing healthcare costs and all those types of things, just checking to make sure I was okay, since the heartburn persisted, even though I was on medication. Turns out that over my DNA, I over process those medications, or at least the first generation of those medications. And there's a second generation that's out there, and I'm now on Asifex. And my doctor switched the medication, and literally overnight, my heartburn went completely away. I have not had heartburn since then. And it's amazing. It's life changing. And I've, of course, followed up with my gastroenterologist, who was also blown away by that. And I think is telling everybody he knows as well what a big difference that has made in my life, that one little cheek swab. Because of that, I had both of my parents, who are in their 80s and on several different medications, do the genetic testing as well. Found out that I get that over processing from my father from for the protonics that I was on prior to, and that some of the issues I had with I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank, but I was on Lipitor, and now I'm on Crestor. My mother has the same issue with that as well for treatment of hyperlipidemia. So my mother, interestingly enough, and this is very subjective, but she switched her medications from Lipitor to Crestor, and is feeling so much better. She has more energy. She has rheumatoid arthritis, and she was having all kinds of pain that I think we were contributing to the rheumatoid arthritis. But actually, in her words, my arthritis seems so much better. So I don't know for sure that was the change of the medication, but her mobility and her energy level are so much different after she changed from Lipitor. So just I just can't talk about how wonderful it is to feel good all the time now, and not have the complications with the heartburn. And this stuff really works. I know everybody on this call is the choir, and I'm sure that you all know much more about this than I do, but I just want to thank everyone who's involved, because I think it makes a huge difference. Yes, I'm a nurse and a healthcare leader, but I'm also a person who's trying to get through every day, and it makes a huge difference. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. We always welcome more stories about how PGX is helping to, champion better living, precision health. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why we're all here and when we get together. Every time we have an opportunity to hear a story, it only further reinforces the important work that we're doing. And sometimes on the day-to-day, there are challenges that we face or struggles that we have to overcome. But when we have opportunities like this morning to hear firsthand experience from patients, from patient advocates, from family members of how much help PGX has, or the help that PGX could have helped or could have had, and the impact it could have had on someone's life and someone's family. It's just a really rewarding experience to be here this morning with all of you. And with that, I wanted to open up the meeting to you, the community members. Whether you might have a question for Joanne or for Julie, or for Jeff. I just want to turn it back over to you, and we'd like to hear from you, please. So we'll open it up for for questions to either any of the speakers, questions about maybe the RIGHT Act, or if there's something specific you're working on that you'd like some perspective from the group.
This is Jamal. Can you hear me? Perfect. I just had a question, and I'll just introduce myself. My name is Jamal. I'm from I work for Illumina, and I've been in the PGX field for 17 years, something like that. And just want to do whatever it is that I can to help make sure that this is a more broadly available test that people are able to get. And to that, and I wanted to ask a little bit more about the RIGHT Act and find out sort of what the process is, and where that stands in terms of getting that more to passing through legislation. I don't know if Sarah or anyone would have more information about that.
Yeah, great. Hey, Jamal, how's it going? So briefly, as far as we know, it's been officially introduced on February 28th by Representative Swalwell and Emmer's offices to the House of Representatives. And it will have to go through a process to pass through the House, and then we would do it, kind of continue to gain momentum and support and try to get it through the Senate as well. And then after that, it will go into appropriation. So for example, if it specifies funding for research and things like that, there's a third kind of process that's appropriations. And that would actually delineate the specific funding to all the and all the ways that it specifies in the bill. So that's kind of a high level of the process. If there's others on the call that have more detail, feel free. But it's kind of an initial win getting it introduced, but still kind of a long road to go down.
I think that, there's great information that ASP put together at fourthcause.org/RightAct. I think anything anyone can do to get additional individual or organizational support sign-on is going to be incredibly helpful. If you're willing to go above and beyond and call your senators and ask them to support it, that will be incredibly helpful, because we do need a Senate companion. So if anybody's willing to go the extra mile and take that step, it will be helpful in moving this forward.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Christine said, that if you haven't already signed on to the RIGHT Act, sign on, and any of your colleagues or stakeholders, even if they're competitors, ask them if they've signed on and get them involved, because each and every one of those names really carries a lot of weight when we get to the House, when we get to the Senate, and they're talking about what kind of support does this have, and people recognize names and people recognize the strength of the support, and it really goes a long way. So I would just, for everybody on this call and for your close colleagues, maybe think of 3 or 4 colleagues you interact with regularly and ask them if they've signed on. Every name counts, every help counts. Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's Bronwyn. I was wondering, does anybody in the room, big room, have insight into NCCN's hesitancy to add or to be more active about the dpyd? Because I can't imagine anyone being beaten about the head about this and ignoring it, but yet it seems to have happened. So why are they hesitating?
Is Dan Hertz on this call at all, by chance?
He's not.
I think he said he wasn't able to attend, but I know the audit group has been reaching out, so maybe Karen or Joanne might have a little bit more detail on their response from NCCN.
My impression is that they are waiting for sort of universal testing before they recommend testing right now. I know one of the things that I've read is that because VistoGuard is on the market, that's kind of the safety net if someone is having a toxic reaction. Therefore, if we have the safety net, then why would we test everyone? If they're going to have a reaction, we have an antidote. What they don't realize is that that 96-hour window is the difference between life and death if you were having a reaction. So it was just a comment of Robert Diazio's in one of the papers that I read a year ago, that we're simply not ready to test everyone at this point. So until it's universal testing, we're not going to do it.
I know Dan,
Which is funny because they're not going to do universal testing unless they recommend it. So until that, right, like cart horse, guys.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The FDA is waiting for the NCCN. I've been in touch with Genentech, trying to get them to add information to the patient handouts about it, to at least have a discussion with your doctor. And basically, I'm told that the FDA, Genentech is waiting for the FDA is waiting for the NCCN, and it goes back and forth. So,
yeah, Joanna, the other thing that is under consideration is that there are other chemotherapeutics that you should test for before they're delivered. And there is a lot of resistance among some communities for doing panel testing versus individual gene testing, something that I personally don't understand, but it is what it is. And so it's a Pandora's box for them. If we open it up, then we need to say that there's indications for all this testing. And it's still not something that's universally accepted or easily implemented in a lot of places. I did want to tell you, you can add us to your MAP list of people who are requiring dpyd at our hospital in our clinical pathways. It's actually part of our EPIC clinical decision support tool.
That's great.
okay.
So,
I have
small
one thing
win
to
for
add.
us,
I did talk to Dan about this, and he spoke with NCCN, and part of their pushback is that they felt that if patients were given lower doses that were found to be intermediate metabolizers, that their impact would not be as good. And he's actually working on a publication because that's not actually what the evidence shows. And I know he's going to be submitting that manuscript and then trying to go back around to the NCCN again. So hopefully that will help as well.
I have a real problem with halfway measures of at least tell the doctor so that he can discuss it with the patient, or tell the doctor and the patient, because I've witnessed enough of those meetings to know that if the doctor's hearing about it for the first time in front of the patient, they're not in alerting or educable mood. They're in a, oh, no big, oh yeah, that, don't worry about it. So until there's some requirement that physicians catch up and be taught this stuff outside of the presence of a patient, ego, arrogance, past experience, assumptions, whatever, cloud it and make it really, I mean, I think it's nice to fight for something like that, but I don't think it's going to change anything.
Even though all of the European Union is now either mandating testing or mandating a discussion about testing, how is it that the health authorities in the entire EU and the UK see the validity of testing? How is it that they have either more data to support their decision, more data than we have? I don't know. I just think it's shocking that it's
have a single
You
payer
wind up
medical
getting the-
system that allows them to make decisions for the whole nation.
Right.
The UK plans to implement universal PGX in 2025. So I grew up in Canada, so I'll just say this out loud, but our capitalist medical system is what gets in the way of appropriate patient care.
So I'll pipe in from the provider side of things. I'm a pediatric oncologist, so we obviously have a lot of uptake of pharmacogenomics for azathioprines. But I'm the only clinical pharmacologist in the hospital. And so I function as the touchstone for providers if they want to send any pharmacogenomic testing, so beyond just 6MP stuff, which we send routinely. And what I have noticed is that the uptake has been better when it's coming from the patients. And so I have mostly requests for a lot of developmental pediatrics, so autism, ADHD, those types of testing. And that has really increased, not due to the providers becoming more interested in it, even though there's, decent evidence for some of the ADHD. I don't prescribe these all the time, but Atomox, you guys know what I'm talking about. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. There's good evidence for some of that, especially with some of the CYP enzymes. And it's been coming from the patients and the parents who are frustrated. And so, is there something to, instead of pushing for NCCN guidelines, and I sit on the NCCN pediatric ALL panel, so I can tell you that we try to purposely be a little bit vague sometimes because these guidelines are used across the world, especially in developing countries. And so there's some cognizance of like these things that are not available everywhere. But we may have better luck in basically marketing to patients if we want the providers to change. Speaking as a provider who has a vested interest in pharmacogenomics.
Well, that highlights a key part. Right now, at most places, you order pharmacogenomics, no one has your back. You're on your own. And so we saw that with PET scans, with MR before that. As these technologies come in, you don't order it until someone has your back. And so it's a big problem at most centers. You'll also notice that the centers that are doing it universally, first of all, they have a universal structure for this, which most places don't. Most medical centers are basically glorified strip malls where you rent a kiosk and sell your wares and reap the rewards that you. So that is an interference. But also you've got a different demographic really pushing these initiatives. So those folks that trained 10 years younger than me have a very different feeling around genomics than most of my peers who trained in the we need to almost kill the patient to kill the cancer type of mindset. So there and look who sits on NCCN. It's people my age, not people that we just heard about. So those are all different factors that are. It's kind of a bummer to say out loud, but are influencing this sort of thing because it is crazy. As one of the group that discovered dpyd STAR2A in 1996, we published it in 1998. It is a huge bummer to think of how many people have died bearing that variant and were not found ever or were found at autopsy.
We had a pediatric case. I mean, we don't see that hardly ever, but if you Google my name, we have a pediatric case that I would not have learned about dpyd otherwise. And I wish I had not learned about it on a patient. Yeah.
Susan, I have a question. This is Karen Merritt. I'm a member of the Advocates for Universal dpyd testing. You have had that patient, that pediatric patient with DPD. So will your hospital now test?
I think we would. I'm trying to remember the last time we had a patient who we give that therapy so little that was like the first patient we'd had exposed to that drug for 10 years. I mean, it's so unusual now. So I think that the providers, those of us who were involved in that patient's case, would absolutely advocate for it. I don't know that if a provider didn't know about that case or wasn't aware of the final outcome of it, that they would test. Everything does go through me pharmacogenomic testing wise, so I would know about it if somebody asked for it. But we haven't had anyone ask for it since that patient. But I also don't think we've given that drug since that patient.
Yeah, it's more common in older patients. My mom passed away similar to Joanne's husband, and her doctor, my stepdad and brother had a meeting or went to her follow-up appointment after her chemo, even though she was not living any longer. And that doctor's response was, I would not have changed my care. I would not have pre-tested. And it's just.
And I don't know, what is the turnaround time now for testing? I haven't done it, in 5 years probably.
I asked my doctor at University of Washington to test me. They did a blood draw. It was sent to the Mayo Clinic, and I had my results back on my personal chart before my doctor even notified me. I had it back in less than 5 days, or it was 5 days.
That's actually, I think that is probably a big barrier that providers see. Especially, I can tell you as the daughter of a cancer patient and a pediatric oncologist that the adult world in terms of cancer often moves more slowly and has a higher tolerance for waiting to get to therapy than the pediatric world. And so for us, I think that would be a barrier is if the turnaround time was weeks. So knowing it's 5 days, I think is helpful and maybe something to share to kind of lead with providers is, hey, you can get this test result back fast and you don't have to delay care for it.
Yeah, I know Dr. Gabriel Brooks, he has that as a standard, like he does it on his patient intake as he's a GI oncologists. So that then makes that test come back probably sooner than some of their other scans.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we have to think about moving to, right? I mean, that's what I talk about with the developmental pediatric physicians is that, hey, this testing might have been helpful, 6 drugs ago, but we're now 2 years into ADHD therapy, and you've already tested, all my theories about what might work and what might not work based on genetics. So there's not a lot of utility at this point, but certainly walking into clinic for their first consultation, it could be. And that's where I think the provider education has to head is that, hey, this isn't a test we do after.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the top of the hour. I think we'll circulate contact information for our speakers. And I wanted to say thank you again for attending this morning, and we'll welcome any opportunity to continue this conversation offline, either on our Slack channel, on any of the social media platforms, or just directly by and between us members. So thank you again for attending this all members meeting. Please go sign up and sign on to the Right Act at fourthcause.org if you haven't already. We're excited for the events on March 24th, National Adverse Drug Event Awareness Day, and have a great week. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate
Thank
you.